When was the first time he hit me? He had been working outside. I walked over to ask him a question. He turned around, hit me across the face with his hand, hard. That was the day before our wedding. I was in shock.
When he started drinking early in the morning, I knew it was going to be a bad day. One night, I locked myself in the bedroom and slept with a little boy on each side of me and an axe in my hands in case he broke the door down.
When I was about 7 months pregnant with my daughter, my husband threw me down the steps. My mother, who was in the living room, heard the noise and came running. By the time she got to me, he was at the bottom of the steps, kicking me in the stomach.
When I went back to that place with the police officers to grab some of my things, I noticed the flowers on the wallpaper, on the windows that kept it dark and stopped people from knowing what was happening. In that moment, I realized I could have died there. Those flowers on that wallpaper could have been the last flowers I ever saw.
I thought about which is the fastest moving bus in the city so I could jump in front of it. You know, some way out. How do I get out of this?
Before allowing anything that he did to me to be the cause of my death, I would have taken it myself. But thanks to Bethany, I didn't have to contemplate that option.
We were a light in the tunnel for the women. They were surrounded by support. They knew there was hope, and they knew that they were valuable.
If it wasn't for Bethany, I wouldn't be alive. I wouldn't be alive.
Bethany House in Toledo, Ohio, has provided shelter, safety, and a future to victims of domestic violence for over 30 years.
It doesn't matter what your history is. It doesn't matter what your religion, formal or informal, is. We want to help.
When people think about domestic violence, they probably imagine the black eye or the physical marks first, but domestic violence is so much more than that.
He was very good at what he did. A lot of times there were no visible marks.
It's verbal abuse, emotional abuse, controlling who she talks to, where she goes.
I wasn't allowed to have friends and was locked inside the apartment, except when I went to work.
When I came home from work one day in the winter, he had thrown all my clothes out onto the lawn from our second-story apartment and changed the lock.
Controlling the children and manipulating the children against the victim also.
Once he set the boys on the couch and told them they had to watch. While he beat me, he told them this is what they had to learn. How to take care of their woman when she got out of line.
Controlling finances, controlling if she can work, where she can work, if she's got access to bank accounts or to the car.
When you heard 4 hours of yelling and screaming how you used up all the gas, he's got to be to work, and now he can't go to work because you used gas in the truck to go to the grocery store.
It isn't just men on women abuse. It is same-sex couples. It is women on men abuse.
For 5 good years, I never received a dime. Even some people, some friends, sent me money through the mail. When the mail comes, she opens the mail and takes the money.
She expected me to always be busy. No time to sit, no time to relax. Scrub the floors, wash the walls, do the laundry, mow the lawn.
It's about power and control. It's not just about the physical abuse.
Sometimes he would force me out onto our tiny second-story balcony, lock me out, make me sleep out there.
It crosses all boundaries. It doesn't happen in poor neighborhoods. It doesn't happen in certain racial or ethnic neighborhoods. It happens anywhere.
He didn't want to mark up my face, you know. He knew men who did that, but he didn't want to do that. He pushed me, he shoved me, he destroyed my furniture.
I have had clients who were themselves in law enforcement and were victims of domestic violence at home.
He found the paint, those half gallons of paint, and he just threw them all over the downstairs.
Women who are more affluent, who may have a strong education background, are just as affected by domestic violence. They just may have more resources to turn to.
I went back to a lawyer and I said, do something about it.
They may be able to turn to their family and stay with them, and their family can support them during their time of need, where more women who don't have those kinds of resources have to turn to shelters.
Bethany House, a long-term shelter for domestic abuse survivors, was founded by a Sylvania Franciscan nun, Sister Rose Treese Lang.
I liked Sister Rose Therese from the minute that I met her. I can feel my eyes getting teary as I think back. Anyone who knew her or worked with her, she stays with you. She was so strong.
She was steady, which she needed to be for everybody that was coming through those doors.
Her conversations were never just about plain, ordinary things. It was always, how can we do this better? Where can we go? How can we make a difference?
She would be as gentle as a lamb. She would be right there with the kids, playing with the kids.
The women in Bethany House very often couldn't imagine that a nun would have anything to teach them. What did she know about married life or living with a man you love or being abused that way? But she was a living example of empowerment and supporting them to find their own strength.
The story of Bethany House began with a chance encounter between Sister Rose Treese and a mother of 4 who had recently left an emergency shelter.
I was very despondent, and my counselor sent me to It's a Woman's meeting. Bernie Skeldon, Teddy Wilson, we were all in this meeting together, and Sister Rose Treese was there. She wanted to find a project, something that would really make a difference. And I said, I know we need a long-term place where I could have stayed and gotten on my feet and got a job and been ready to go. And Sister Rose Treese grabbed a hold of it, and Bethany was born. And those women and we became the first board of Bethany House.
I was very determined that they would know that these women were hurt. Psychologically, they were messed up. 30 days, nothing like that. They needed long-term shelter.
The hunt was soon on for a building that could house several women and their children. The answer? A dusty, abandoned convent.
When I think of the first Bethany House, a little old mothballed convent in the South End that could only hold as many residents and their children as filled the bedrooms upstairs. Sister Rose Therese opened Bethany House in January of 1984. I told her that I would like to be involved, and I provided some type of direct services, counseling, representation, whatever, to residents Bethany House for about 25 years.
She asked me to be the first resident. I was able to move in with the kids.
When we moved into Bethany, I was 12. There were so many rooms in Bethany. We had a ball. I mean, this house was so huge. It was a lot larger than what we were used to. And to be able to explore and discover, it was like a vacation.
We tried to make Bethany as homey as possible. The kids, we had a playroom with toys and books and all kinds of stuff.
Once we got to Bethany, we were able to sleep, and that was something I had a hard time with when I was younger.
From the very beginning, Sister Rose Treese proved to be extremely hands-on.
She was a hard worker. We both did all the scrubbing and the cleaning and getting the food from the food banks, and People were bringing things in and donating things, and we just built up from that point.
It was in 4th grade, I think probably like 10-ish, maybe about 10 years old, is when I was at the Bethany House. Sister Rose Therese was passionate and fun.
And then you know what he did?
I don't remember her being really strict with me. I was a good kid though. One thing I remember is her cooking though. She liked to cook chicken, and was still raw, kind of in the middle. And she had cooked that for me, and I was like, no. She was like, no, it's good. Really, eat it. Just eat it.
Sister Rose Therese was like our grandma. She took us right underneath her wing. She made us feel so comfortable and so safe. She was down on the floor playing with us, dancing with us. She did everything that a grandma would do and then some.
In 4th grade, my mother received one of the worst beatings she had ever received.
Leave us alone! Let's go right now! Come on!
Someone in the neighborhood must have called the police.
It's fine.
Right behind him was Sister Rose Therese, and this is a time we didn't have Twitter, text messaging, no cell phones. I mean, Sister Rose Therese was a superhero because I do not know how she knew where to find us. And she just took us back to the shelter and took care of us while my mother was in the hospital. She was a superhero. I always remember her as that.
Security became an early priority. The location of Bethany House was strictly concealed to safeguard the residents from abusive partners.
Some of them would give away the location, and that put everybody's safety in danger. Sister Rose Therese would tighten up, make more rules. You know, people had to be in by a certain time. You couldn't hang out front.
The curfew was probably one of the biggest complaints because it was very set in stone. You had to be there at 9 o'clock, the doors were locked, and if you didn't come in, you would be written up or you would be asked to leave.
That's for not only your protection, but the women that come after you and their children.
On a couple of occasions, I would try to stand up to Sister Rose Therese, but it was very hard because she was very stern. And it was her way or the highway, basically, you know what I'm saying?
There was a man, an abuser, an ex-husband, who tracked his wife to the location. I don't know how that came about.
Open the door! Sally, I know you're in there, come on!
Sister went to court with the resident, and when the woman identified her ex-husband in the hall and said, that's him, Sister Rose Therese walked up to him, pointing her finger in his chest and telling him, don't you ever dare come to my house and frighten my women like that. Don't you dare. And he was taller than she was, but he wasn't the brute that his ex-wife imagined him to be. And she told me afterwards that as she stood there and watched him sort of backing against the wall, totally flabbergasted, not knowing what to do, Sister Rose Therese gave that woman a real reality check that day in court. And the man, too.
I ended up living at Bethany for probably about 2.5 years. I was involved and working, I was doing some of the PR and going to do the referrals at the Y and bringing women in. And so I was active and I was a part of it.
Bethany gave us a sense of security that we needed to go forward, to see that Mom was a woman, not just Mom.
I was feeling much healthier and was able to feel confident about going, and so I did. We moved out and started from there.
After several years in the first location, Bethany House relocated to another, larger convent.
Again, it was dorm style of living where there were shared bathrooms and shared kitchen.
There were 6 bedrooms that were big enough to keep a crib. So if a mother was pregnant or had a little baby under 1 or 2, she got the bigger bedroom, and a toddler usually stayed with their mom. And all the children had their own bedrooms.
Sister Faith and Sister Rose Therese allowed me to move into the Bethany house in May of 1994, and I lived there until January of 1995.
Sister Faith, Sister Rose Therese were just very helpful, instrumental in helping me get back on track with my life.
Makita, welcome to Bethany House.
In the past, Bethany House was quite selective about applications. Survivors had to demonstrate a desire to change their lives in order to be admitted.
You have rules? We did an interview, and we told them about the contract agreement, especially the part about going to school, getting their GED, either being trained for work or continue their present job, counseling, parenting classes sometimes, so they knew what was expected.
Many of the short-term places that they were able to stay got them out of the abusive situation, but then where did they go? And they weren't any different. They didn't learn any new skills, they didn't learn any new techniques, they didn't learn anything that would help them not go back to an abusive situation.
There was an aptitude test.
Your test scores have arrived, and I think you're going to be very pleasantly surprised.
Oh, I was so worried.
The results said that I should be an electrical engineer, which totally amazed me. I didn't think I had any more brain cells, and when results came out, my whole perspective on life changed. They actually had faith in me, and nobody had ever had faith in me. And they just knew I could do it, and I didn't know I could do it.
I called you in today to talk about curfew. It says here you've missed curfew twice already.
By like 5 minutes.
5 minutes is 5 minutes. We need you to be here.
In Bethany's early days, Sister Rose Therese emphasized house rules and the consequences of breaking them.
She wasn't somebody to walk in with a box of Kleenex and say, "Here, let me console you."
We need you to be here on time.
Tough love just describes it, I think.
The school of thought was that we had to have a lot of rules for women when they got out of an abusive situation.
The biggest rules and the biggest rule that you would be dismissed from Bethany or asked to leave is if you had any contact with your abusive partner.
No men were allowed in the house whatsoever.
There was a woman on the second floor, and she had a person in her room. I knocked a couple times. Finally, she opened her door, and I said, "What's the matter? Who was in here?" And she said, "My boyfriend. He left through the window." I know I looked at her, and I says, "You know what this means, don't you? Tomorrow, I'll take you back to the YWCA." The trust was broken.
And it was about tough love, no nonsense. You're going to have to be strong, stand on your own feet for your sake and your children's sake.
We all needed the structure in our lives.
I started dating a fellow, and Sister Rose Therese was very much against it. You know, her idea was to be by yourself for up to a year to let yourself heal and stuff. And I was kind of stubborn about the situation, so we kind of butted heads about that a few times. Sister Rose Therese was correct. He was not the guy for me.
When they got really frustrated with the rules, like they wanted to color outside of the lines, and Rose Therese wouldn't let them color outside the lines, they would obviously react, out of their emotion, and often talk about going back to their abuser.
I think it was hard for Sister Rose Therese as time went on. The way the women sometimes would be negative about the house or negative about her or the rules, it was breaking her heart.
Sometimes the women would say, sometimes I want to leave Bethany House because at least at home I get sex.
Some women, we say, they got away from the abusive partner, now the director is abusing them. And that was personally hard for me because I never pictured or saw myself as being an abuser.
Sister Rose Therese was neither a trained social worker nor a lawyer. Initially, she relied on her instincts and her convent experience to run the house.
Bethany at that time was more like a convent. They all lived together in the same house. They all went to mandatory group. They all were expected to get a job, and they were expected this. And expectations are wonderful, but I think we're all individuals and we all have different gifts and different things we want to accomplish in our life, and not all the women wanted to accomplish what maybe someone else was telling them to do.
I think the order and the predictability of having chores and expectation kept people stable, especially the children. They knew what to expect. The children came from very unpredictable situations. They didn't know when something was going to blow up or something was going to spark.
Sister Rose Therese wanted the women to have mandatory counseling. Whether they wanted it or not, they were going to be in these counseling sessions, and darn it, they were going to learn something.
Bonnie Schrock and I were the two counselors that were there. She ran the women's groups and I ran the children's groups.
We would meet with Bonnie for our counseling sessions, and that's when we all had a chance to really express ourselves. Because sometimes with the nuns and everything, with them being as strict as they are, it was hard to express yourself.
As I worked with the children, they were across the board.
If you were this little boy, how would you be feeling about the police coming all the time?
Scared of the police coming.
A primary group, that tended to be more of a play therapy. The middle kids, they had a lot of frustration, I think. I think they didn't know they were in conflict. They loved their fathers. They wanted to be part of their life. Some of the boys were learning behaviors that were inappropriate, how to talk to their mothers, you know, swear at them, call them names, kind of model what they had seen their dad do. And the adolescents really dealt with a lot of anger.
But when you treat me like that, I feel like your father is standing there doing the same thing.
Ma, you're over-exaggerating.
They didn't know how to communicate. They were frustrated themselves. They felt like they had to parent a lot of the younger children. Sometimes they felt like they were parenting their own mothers.
When I was younger, I didn't realize it was therapy. It was sneaky therapy because it was a lot of coloring and a lot of asking how we feel.
It was a lot of kind of restructuring who they were and building self-esteem for them across the board.
I think the sneaky therapy did help, because when you're a child, sometimes you can't verbalize exactly everything you're going through.
I was so terrified that if I rode on the elevator with a man, I just froze and just flattened myself against the wall. It took about 4 years of counseling before I finally got back to the person I was before all this started.
Domestic violence touches a lot of lives.
The mandatory sessions occasionally created some positive effects on the women, despite their resistance.
They were learning how to deal with conflict in a good, positive way, rather than lashing out and screaming. They really did need some therapy, and they did need some counseling. But mandatory probably wasn't a very good decision back in the day.
That is a real strength of yours.
Now we realize the real world is not having all those rules and control, and yes, you must go to mandatory counseling and therapy. Now the rule of thought is that we have to give them options because they have to make decisions in their own life.
Welcome, ladies, to our Wednesday afternoon group.
The intent was to make it a self-help group, you know, peers helping peers, and talk about their experience of domestic violence and their recovery.
I'm sorry, we have a bigger problem.
But I know sometimes there were a lot of house issues.
I don't know who keeps leaving their laundry in the machine.
You need to start taking care of your children.
I'm not your mother. Clean up your own stuff.
It's not my job. Who keeps drinking my pink lemonade?
Life in a former convent, with its cramped space and lack of privacy, created the biggest obstacle to domestic harmony.
They were sharing kitchen, they were sharing dining room, they were sharing living space. All they had was their own bedroom. You were dealing with personalities that you may or may not have gotten along with.
We did not have any cleaning persons that came in, and so the chores would be rotated. Some women didn't do as well as others thought they should have done. And so sometimes there were hard feelings.
It wasn't even about their abuse. It was about feeling invaded. People would steal their food. They would discipline their children.
Get in, please, just get in.
People come in and out a lot too. Women leave, maybe go back to their abuser, maybe they get a home, maybe they go out on their own, then they come back, or a new family moves into it. So they were constantly trying to learn how to navigate that system, and that was very, very difficult for them.
He once hit me with a golf club and also with a piece of electrical conduit that had the copper wires exposed. Many times, he would stuff a sock in my mouth so the neighbors wouldn't hear me screaming.
People often struggle to understand the behavior of a domestic violence victim. How did she get in trouble? And why did she stay?
Many of them grew up in a dysfunctional home, an alcoholic home, a drug home. There was no father. Their mothers chose abusive individual men in their life. So in a sense, they kind of did what they knew.
When we first started dating, it was just like it was heaven. He was good to me. He opened the doors up for me. He took me out to eat.
Whatever she wants, he's going to give her. And he's loving and wonderful and terrific and just walks on water and just a great individual. Then he puts down the hammer gradually.
He started putting his hands on me, and after that, then the drugs came in.
A batterer will try to isolate the victim from all other supports that she may have in her life.
No friends, no family. Maybe she gets pregnant, has children.
My abuser kept me away from my family, kept me away from friends, wasn't allowed to have friends. Locked me in the apartment, wasn't allowed to go outside of the apartment, except to work. Then he'd come to work and follow me at work.
Probably tells her what she's going to cook, where she's going to go, what she's going to do. Maybe she can go to the doctor and take the kids. Very, very limited. All about power and control and what I can do.
I was afraid. I don't know anybody. United States is a strange world. I don't even know where to begin. And I was threatened that.
While I was pregnant with my son, we started arguing about dumb stuff, as we often did. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, and he pulled out a shotgun and pointed it to my chest, threatening that he could kill me any time he wanted to. And while I was sitting there facing death, I actually felt relief. Relief that it would all be over.
When I did get out and I did leave, I would always be afraid of I was gone too long. I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. I need to be at the house taking care of things.
Nothing like sleeping because I might be caught anytime. It doesn't matter. 12 midnight, 1 a.m., anytime. Once you hear, Celestina, you have to jump.
Other people from the outside can say, why didn't you leave? What's wrong with you? You should have left. There's plenty of jobs out there.
I was thoroughly convinced I had nowhere to go. I had no car. I had no job. I had been isolated from everybody for so long.
When I finally left, I didn't know what to do. I hadn't worked in like 13 years. I was just a homemaker.
Typically they haven't worked. They don't work. The only person working in the family is the abuser. So they're very beholden to that person for everything, for whether their children eat, what they eat, how they eat. Most of them don't have a very good education, a work history. They're really totally and completely dependent on this person for everything and anything.
If I speak to anybody, the police will arrest me and I will be in jail and I will never see my children anymore. So that was why I was scared, of trying to escape.
They really don't have a life of their own, and I don't think they know how to make decisions based on that because the abuser has made all the decisions for them, and they get used to that.
I would drink, I would smoke, I would take the pills that he put in my hand for me to take. Yeah, I did it all. Anything that he wanted me to do. so that way it just wouldn't be him screaming.
Now that it's 25, 20, 30 years later, it's embarrassing to think that somebody has that much control over you. And you don't feel as though there's a way out when you're in that situation, even though how many people along the way reached their hands out and tried to pull me out of that situation. At the time, you feel there's nothing that can be done.
The Sisters of St. Francis have been involved with Bethany House from the beginning. It was always far more than Sister Rose Treese's personal pet project.
When Sister Rose Treese got involved with a ministry or with a project, everybody got involved. She came to the sisters and said, I need your help. Would you please step up? We need people to watch the children. We need fundraising. We need to put food on the table. So we always thank our sisters in so many ways who gave their time and their talent to be able to make our Bethany a real ministry.
Sundays were the best. They were a very enjoyable time. We would all go to the convent and we would all eat dinner, walk the grounds. It was so beautiful.
There was an outpouring of support through the Sisters of St. Francis and volunteers and groups at Christmas. Women would say this is the best Christmas they ever had.
They had presents upon presents loaded. Everybody in the Bethany House, all their kids, all the women, we all got just a load of things from donations from people that didn't even know us, people that just wanted to make things better for us at the time, and it was very beautiful.
I remember putting Valentine cards out where the women came home and got their mail. And I also put $5 in each Valentine. And there was a 35-year-old woman. She said, thank you. I never got a Valentine card before in my life. I never forgot that. How could she have never received a Valentine in her life? To make people feel that they were important, that they were valued, I think was very, very important.
Finally, with financial support from the Sisters of St. Francis healthcare system, Bethany was able to transition out of convent living.
In 2009, the opportunity came to move into an apartment building setting. So now each family has their own apartment, their own bathroom, their own kitchen, and it gives them greater privacy and more independence also.
She let me know that on Wednesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon I could come to Bethany House. And she took me to this beautiful place. And I was thinking, oh, that's pretty cool, nice. And she goes, no, this is where you're gonna live. I still got the rock from when we propped open the door for me to take a few boxes I had.
We're able to accommodate any victim, including men who are victims of domestic violence. Where other shelters may not be able to serve boys over the age of 13, we've had many high school boys that have come with their mom. I use the female pronouns she or her when referring to victims purposely. And that's not to diminish that it doesn't happen the other way around. But overall, 90 to 95% of victims of domestic violence are women who are being hurt by their male partners or ex-partners.
We have 16 units available for our shelter program and 14 available for Step Up at this time.
All the apartments that we provide to families are completely stocked with everything they need, and furniture, and personal hygiene items that they may need while they're staying with us.
They're given all the services that they can imagine. Individual therapy if they want it, a social worker. They have so much they can do that the sky is a limit for them now.
All I had was a high school diploma. I had no other schooling. After I completed my bachelor's in education, that was for public affairs and communication, I immediately rolled into my master's degree, and that was in a special program at the university for counseling.
They are not inmates, and that's a misconception that a lot of people have in the community. Oh, are they on house arrest? And I'm like, no, they're victims. You know, they were a victim of crime. They haven't committed a crime.
Just keep going to school. Then pretty soon the licensure started adding up and the education added up, and I became better at what I did and more confident, and I believe that I've had impact on people, just kind of like Bethany had impacted me.
We have 2 programs at Bethany House. Everyone who comes through our doors starts in the shelter program. After they've been there at least a year, and if they meet the criteria, they have the opportunity to move downstairs to our step-up program. The folks who live down there pay rent. They have a little more freedom, but they still get the safety of the building. They still have access to the advocates and the supports and the resources that the shelter participants have.
It sounds as though you've stepped back a little bit and looked at it.
Every survivor's journey through Bethany House is unique, shaped by her past, her needs, and her personal goals.
Well, the services start with where she's at and what she identifies as priorities for her. So that could be legal issues that are going on for her, trying to get protection orders in place, going through the long process of divorce, helping her to get connected to a good attorney, go back to school, get certified in something that would better enable her to get a job.
No services are mandated. It's really what they want. And many times, when clients come to Bethany House, they don't know what they want.
I didn't close the front door to my place for almost 2 months. The whole time I lived there, I kept the blinds open so I could see outside. It took me almost a month to be able to take a shower without asking for permission.
Bethany House does offer on-site counseling to many of the residents if they need it. Many times transportation is a barrier for the survivor, so if they need a counselor to come on site, that is available to them.
Bethany House brought in a counselor for me to see on site 3 days a week. She had me going outside on my own, just to be outside 5 minutes, 10 minutes every hour. I want to say it took me almost about 90 days where I could close the door and slept for 4 hours.
It may take them a week, it may take them a month to decide what services they want to be involved in. Some people may not want to be involved in any services. It's really up to them what they want to do.
We also have folks who come and do like case management for mental health or trafficking.
In Nigeria, I was a high school teacher. Somebody gave me an offer to come to the United States to better my future, to make enough money to help in the education of my children. It was very difficult when I was leaving the children. In fact, we cried. Without my children, without my family, no friends, it was horrible. And I look unto God. I said, when will this come to an end? Is this how I'm going to die? I cried all night. God, help me. Let me see my children again.
Celestina finally escaped her captivity and found shelter at Bethany House. When her case was investigated by the FBI, she was identified as a victim of international human trafficking. Celestina's children were flown from Nigeria to the United States and reunited with her.
My children, the 5 of them, that day it was like a miracle. I was so happy. We were all happy.
When my mom went to US when I was 7, life was hard because I didn't have anyone to teach me how to do stuff. And then when I was 12, I came here and saw her, and then I was so happy because life was hard living without a mom.
They lived with me at Bethany House. The staff at Bethany House were of great help to me and the children. I don't know what I would have done without Bethany House.
We were at a movie, but he wanted to leave and get high. I didn't want to get high. I just wanted to pick up my son. It turned into a fight.
As far as the criminal justice system, it's like 1 step forward, 4 steps back. I think there have been a lot of strides made, but we still have a long way to go.
He pulled the car over, dragged me out, and threw me in the snow. Then he took his belt off and started beating me with it. And when he was done, he got in the car, drove away, and left me stranded in the snow.
The criminal justice system is set up to protect the rights of the accused, not necessarily to be sympathetic to a victim. And so we do see a lot of our survivors struggling to have their needs met, to be heard.
I have spinal and neck injuries and permanent nerve damage in my face. My left eye periodically goes blind. I have had 9 surgeries in all, including a complete hysterectomy. At that point, my body had been through so much, I suffered a heart attack. And he is still a free man after all that he did to me.
I've testified on the residents' behalf because a lot of times people don't understand that survivors haven't done anything wrong. They were the victim, and the whole point of me going is to help the court system understand that.
My abuser lost his job because he used heroin and meth. He refused to take a drug test at work that he knew he'd fail. He was very angry, and he loaded up 4 guns with ammo. He told me if I did anything to upset him, he would kill me. I was terrified. I didn't eat or sleep for 4 whole days.
In defending herself, she might scratch him or leave marks, scratches on his face or hand, even if she's the one who calls the police. When they show up and he claims that she's hysterical and she attacked him, I have seen many instances where the woman was arrested or taken out of the house, even though she was the one seeking help.
I'm the one that called you. He ran into me with his car in the backyard, pinning me against a fence. He warned me he'd kill me if I went to the police.
Unfortunately, many times, the court doesn't look at a survivor as a victim of crime. They look at a survivor as part of the problem.
I was watching TV with a girlfriend of mine, and he accused me of being in love with her. He was drunk, and he said if he couldn't have me, no one could. He beat me to a pulp, blackened both of my eyes, bruised me up and down. That time I did call the police. He served 1.5 years in prison.
So it's been, I don't know, very refreshing.
After emergency needs are met, Bethany House residents often begin to focus on developing life skills.
If someone's going to become independent, they have to understand how to budget money,
If you don't have the money in there, they do not take it out. So.
how to improve their credit score. One of the goals in the financial literacy class is that they open a savings account or a checking account, and we teach them how to do that.
Sometimes there's physical disabilities happening because of the abuse that's gone on.
The blows that I would take in the middle of the evening have left me with kidneys that are considered boxer's kidneys. The horrendous sexual things that I went through with my abuser, I didn't stop bleeding.
This type of work can be really challenging. You hear a lot of raw, hard things, and you help people through some really emotional times.
I had an entire team working on taking away what he had done to me so that I could live.
The children of Bethany House ages range from newborn all the way up to 19 years old.
Oklahoma? Children are in such a vulnerable position when they are witnessing domestic violence, when they're hearing the insults against their mother, when they're seeing her put down constantly, when they're seeing her controlled, and they're hearing all the blaming that's put upon her for what's happening in the home.
You can do anything.
We have a full-time youth program coordinator who works with all of the kids, and she provides advocacy in schools and daycare. She provides on-site programming and activities for the kids. She does enrichment time with the kids, one-on-one tutoring, and educational support.
Bethany House provides a learning zone for the children, age-appropriate games, computer lab, where they can go in and do homework, do research, things like that. The teens typically like to hang out in the lounge where there's a TV with cable, and the littler kids like to hang out in the learning zone with volunteers where they can paint and do things like that.
We have a playground for families to go out and hang out together and really connect and socialize.
What we've seen at Bethany House is that relationship between child and victim, usually mom, is very damaged. Our work really starts at trying to build that trust, trying to put her in the position of authority, because usually the child will see mom on the same level as them because she's never been allowed to be the parent. She's never been allowed to be mom.
I have noticed a little puddle underneath the sink.
When I need to do a repair inside a unit, when the children are around, I want the mother present so she knows exactly what's happening. She feels in control of the situation because many times she was not in control of it before.
We want to empower her to take back that role, to help the kids see that she's capable and that she's able to keep them safe and that she's making good decisions.
Should we try it?
Yes.
Okay, let's see what happens. I want to show the children that not all men are something to be afraid of. Not all men are angry and abusive. And it kind of gives them that reality and a new direction that this is not as bad as it was before. And they can trust again.
And you have a nice day, and I'll see you, kids.
Okay, thanks so much, Tom.
It's amazing to see families come in on day one and the dynamic that's happening between mom and the kids.
The last couple of weeks have been a little rough.
How there's a lot of disrespect happening from the kids' point of view, outright rebellion and disobedience, name-calling against mom.
So many times, little boys watch their dad beat up mom and they think that's what they're supposed to do. And little girls grow up thinking that that is how they're supposed to be treated.
And when we are able to provide them with support, group and family counseling, it's amazing to see a year and a half later the transformation that can happen in that relationship.
I didn't realize there was so much disrespect going on.
And they've been able to tell us, I see my mom in a different light now. Now I understand what was happening and I understand what was going on. But it's a long road. It's a long road to recovery.
After 1 year, some residents choose to remain at Bethany in the Step-Up program, while others move out. Either way, survivors can still connect to Bethany and its resources.
Now we're tackling issues like employment and education. They're at a new point in their lives. So I've helped folks get housing, access furniture resources, food banks, clothing resources. So just helping them with social skills and how to reset boundaries now that they're outside of the Bethany House bubble.
Is there someone in your room?
Bethany House no longer emphasizes rules and restrictions as in the early days.
Survivors do sometimes break rules or come home late, and we don't exit them because of that. We choose to work with them and sit down with them and have that ongoing discussion. If we exit them, they're going to be back in a situation that's not safe, and that's not what we want.
As a not-for-profit agency, Bethany House depends on sustained and generous support from friends, volunteers, and the community.
We partner with local agencies to get groups on site, but we also have a lot of people who volunteer and donate their time to come to Bethany House.
We have a very small staff, and so we do rely on help to come in with children, helping with different groups, helping with painting, cleaning, and also to helping to supply the needs that our families have.
The real need was transportation. The women have asked for the car because they need to get to their jobs. Last year we gave away 7 or 8 cars. The total number of cars for the program since its inception is 22. Well, I have such a good feeling about these 22 cars that are out on the road. Not only these women are being helped, but, pay it forward. And that just gives me goosebumps when I hear that.
Bethany House is not meant to be a permanent home. Eventually, each survivor leaves to fashion a personal future.
Ultimately, it's up to the survivor if they want to stay at Bethany House or if they want to move on. And it's really just a conversation on, are you sure that you're ready?
It was huge for me I had never lived alone in my life. I had never lived without a man in my life.
The last thing we want to do is set them up for failure. So we would do budgeting. Okay, this is what your rent will be, this is what your bills will be, this is how much you make. Is this realistic for you? The most important thing that we always let residents know is you can always come back. If there's ever an issue, our door's always open, and we're always here to support you.
I always had somewhere safe to come back to, even if I made mistakes. And have a safe place to go home to, with people to put their arms around me and go, it's okay, we'll do it different next time.
I know right now to this day, if I needed anything for my kids, for myself, I could go back to Bethany House and say, look, I've fallen down, I need some help. Can you please help me and my children? And I know they would.
After she left Bethany House, Sister Rose Teresa's health declined, but her commitment to the women never wavered. She died in March 2005.
She wasn't a huggy-touchy, lovey-dovey type of person by any means, but what really summed her up, she loved us. And that's what they knew, that she truly loved them.
She was a very strong and wonderful woman, wonderful sister, wonderful Franciscan in our community. We are all extremely proud of the way in which her ministry developed and the way in which her life developed. Bethany was her star on the Christmas tree.
Once upon a time, I lived with the devil. But today, I'm not afraid of him anymore. That door to my past is now nailed shut. It's a wall.
The legacy of Bethany House is its survivors. Since 1984, victims of domestic abuse have come through its doors, taken time to heal and grow, becoming confident and stronger. They leave not as victims, but as survivors.
I believe that we helped women to realize there were options so they wouldn't feel trapped, that there was only one way to live their life.
Currently, I'm clinical director at a women's treatment facility. It's long-term, homeless women, 6 months to a year. Most of them homeless, have lost their children, basically the same condition I was when I came to Bethany House.
Since Bethany House, I now rent a house, living with my 5 kids. I'm very proud of my children. They are doing real good with their education. The boy is in college, studying his pre-med biomedical. The girl is in college, studying BSN nursing. The oldest in high school wants to be a doctor. The youngest wants to be a lawyer.
My son has given me a grandson, 4 years old, who is the light of my life. There's nothing like a grandmother's love. It's just unexplainable.
I was able to buy my house. I was able to pay it off in full. And I live in a really good neighborhood. I never wanted my kids to be going through what I had to go through. I didn't want them to be homeless. I didn't want them to be hungry.
I'm in a very good place now. I have 4 children, 6 grandkids. My kids have been everything. They went through all of it with me.
She's the strongest woman I know. I knew the things he did to her, and there were times where he would pray all night that she would wake up. You didn't know she was dead. And then you'd wake up in the morning and breakfast would be being cooked and everything was back to normal as it usually were, and you got dressed and ate breakfast and you went to school. How she made it through and still be such a loving and caring person, I don't know how. And sometimes I get mad and I wish I could make it up to her because her life has been so hard. But she doesn't give up. She's a fighter.
I have a good life. I have a great life. I got my degree in mental health technology. I own my own home. I have never been married since, and don't want to be.
I've been with this man, it'll be 8 years in October. He's so amazing. He treats me like a queen. He takes care of me and my boys. He works 2 jobs. I can come to him and talk to him about anything. He is my best friend. And we've been talking about marriage, and I'm getting excited about that because I really love this man, and I know he loves me.
I want to study law, and we'll see where that goes from here. Right now it's paralegal studies, and if there's one thing I've learned at Bethany House is you set your goals and one step at a time, and then you see where that journey takes you, and just keep moving forward.
When I think of Bethany now, a smile comes to my face because they have evolved so much. We did what we could back in the day, but now they really understand and we really know what we need to do to help these women.
I don't use the word proud very easily. It's just not a natural word for me, but I can use it about Bethany House. I am so proud to have been a part of the history of Bethany House. Just thinking about that makes it worth getting up tomorrow and starting the battle all over again.
Survivors leave Bethany House empowered to choose futures of fullness, beyond mere survival, to lives blessed with love and joy. Not just bread, but roses too.
I'm so grateful for the Bethany House to get me on the right track back then to end up where I am now in my life.
The Bethany House is a blessing. It gave us hope. It gave my mother hope. I don't even know how to measure it.
Thank you. I'm proud of you. You are worth everything to this community.
The Lord is my shepherd. I'm a highly religious woman, and I kept praying, and I believed that God answers by prayer, and He really did answer my prayers.
Thank you is not enough. I really believed I was headed for a casket, and I'm alive.
I never thought I'd be where I'm at today, and it took other people to get me here. There's no way I did it by myself at all. God works through other people, and the people He's put in my life have been amazing.
I could have ended up one of those statistics, one of those women that died at the hands of an abusive man. I could have had a son that was raised in an abusive home and in turn turned out to be an abusive man because that's all he knew. Had to stop the cycle.
As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead, go crying through our singing, their ancient call for bread.
The fact that we still need a Bethany House so desperately is heartbreaking. The fact that we have a Bethany House gives you hope.